Will it get any better for Deshaun Foster and company after that game versus Minnesota? Let's take a look back. What did and what didn't happen?
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yotzheimer. Thanks for making this your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast ads, available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for your support. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. All you got to do is download the app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. And where we get started today is, as we usually do on the Monday episode, kind of grades, reactions once again to the UCLA-Minnesota game, letting the salt just fester. Just frustrated with how that one ended the other night, right? A game where UCLA could have and should have won, had a double-digit lead for the first time all season long, had their first lead from the beginning, and instead they fell behind. All right, so let's start offensively, right? The big question, the big story is, do you go with Martin or do you go with Ethan Garbers? That's been kind of going back and forth these last couple of weeks after Martin played a sound football game against Penn State, and Ethan Garbers threw 3 picks, right? 1 tipped, 1 Hail Mary, and then just 1 ugly interception, all right? So depending on how you view Ethan Garbers' night, you're either, hey, Garbers faced the best defense in the country at getting picks, or you're like, same old Garbers, he was going to do the same thing regardless of which defense he's played because he's had 2 or more turnovers every game that he started this season. Okay, so the pro Martin crowd, you got a choice there. You got an opportunity. You look at the run game, and you're like, well, UCLA's only running for 36 yards in the whole game. But then you see UCLA play action. They go deep, and they hit J. Michael Sturdivant for a touchdown. He's been quiet for some time. Not that he really had some wiggle room for Justyn Martin, but, you know, Garbers hit that deep throw, and the deepest throw that Martin threw against Penn State was a little swing wheel route that turned into a 50-plus yard gain. All right? So it was an up-and-down performance for Ethan Garbers, to say the least, right? Looked very impressive, a lot more mobile in the pocket. Man, nice play to throw it down to Loya to set up the first touchdown of the game for UCLA on its opening drive. The great bomb to give UCLA the lead in the fourth quarter in J. Michael Sturdivant. But then just poor execution when UCLA had chances to extend the lead or get back in the game, or most importantly, ice this game away. And some of that is not all on Garbers. Yes, the 3 picks, they all have something to do with that, whether it's the poor time management to try and get down the field a lot quicker, a poor throw, like against his body, throwing it to the right side of the field, although he has more receivers there. Yes, the start Justyn Martin band is getting louder, and they're beating to the tune of their own drum. Let me tell you a funny stat in this game, all right? Ethan Garbers actually had a higher QBR than Max Brosmer, all right? Like, in the in-game QBR, the quarterback who threw 3 picks, less interceptions, had less completions than Brosmer, the Minnesota quarterback, actually had a higher QBR than the Minnesota quarterback. Isn't that nuts? So if you reframe your mind, you're like, all right, Brosmer, he handled the game. He was getting a little pressure in his face, a lot from some blitzes from the UCLA defense, which we'll talk about. But Garbers, you look at the numbers, and ironically, you throw in the QBR numbers in there, and the UCLA quarterback actually had better numbers than the Minnesota quarterback, despite the same amount of completions, 100 more yards, though, but 3 more interceptions. And, okay, Garbers, he made some plays. Justyn Martin is definitely more athletic than Ethan Garbers, but Garbers has showcased that he will run or needs to run because the pocket collapses again and again. I just keep going back to this point that the offense is just hampered by a terrible offensive line, extremely poor play calling, and then the worst, and usually just the hammerhead to the nail, man, is when they get all those things, or sometimes all those in once, Garbers compounds it by making a huge mistake or just not holding on to the football. And I understand that Martin deserves an opportunity, right? He did nothing wrong. He did everything right that he needed to do against Penn State. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't spectacular. But UCLA has been nowhere near either of those things. They just need solid and clean. And then next thing you know, they could be playing games where they can win some of these games coming up on the road. That's a far-fetched statement right now coming from me. But hey, you play a clean game of football, you never know what can happen anytime you step onto the field. And the Bruins have not played a single game of football where they played 4 quarters this year. Maximum 2.5 quarters, depending on how you grade that UCLA-Minnesota game. A shutout start against the Golden Gophers, maybe a half of football in the fourth, but just dreadful offense in the third and fourth quarters when they could have opened up the lead, when they had the 10-0 lead, had the ball coming out of the break, did absolutely nothing, and then Minnesota, in blink of an eye, is leading heading to the fourth quarter. All right? That is what this team was dealt with. So it's a lot to put on Garbers when the pocket collapses literally every time. You see some of these plays that are called, and you're like, where's Garbers going to throw the ball? It's 2 receivers against like 5 DBs. And then, oh, lo and behold, he's just trying to make a play happen, and it turns into a pick. All right? I just wonder the difference in play calling. I guess we all have to go back and see how different the plays look when Garbers is in there versus the one game that Martin got to start, right? It's just frustrating because this UCLA team deserved, I don't know if deserve's not the right word, but they should have done a little bit more than they did. Now, props to Minnesota. They were very physical. They could handle the line of scrimmage. They dominated that. But I think maybe the most telling sign of who should start came from PJ Fleck postgame, which I missed this until early in the week, later in the weekend, when he said, yeah, another coach talking about ghosts in quarterbacks, right? So PJ Fleck, if you missed it, James Franklin was like, we're training for a ghost. PJ Fleck was uttering similar, fun little quotes there. And then PJ, the Minnesota head coach, the one-time, I guess, hopeful UCLA coach, and he didn't really get a second look at it, was that they thought Justyn Martin was going to come and play off the tape, right? And I've been, of course, in disagreement with that immediately, right? I've always thought that if Martin was truly going to try and take this job from Garbers, then there would have been a bigger challenge for him from spring into fall camp with the complicated offense that they've all tried to install this year that just has not worked out. The Eric Bieniemy West Coast offense, it has not worked out. But then again, you got the other head coach who's like, yeah, we thought that other dude was going to start. And yet Garber still had a quote-unquote better QBR rating for the game. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but yes, you throw a few more yards, you get more yards per pass completion, and he theoretically had a better game than Brosmer. I don't know. The run game is god-awful, right? Your best back is Jalen Berger going 8 carries for 20 yards, 2.5 yards per carry. And this is a Minnesota team that faced 2 very physical fronts the last 2 weeks prior to that, Michigan and a USC team who they beat, where they would allow 4 yards per carry coming into the UCLA game. And the Bruins could not muscle up, use the physicality in front of them, and rise to the occasion in this game. Whether it was to get a yard facing 1st and 10 at their own 2-yard line at the end of the game, when they needed a first down to maybe ice it away. If they get a first down, game is most likely over, or at least they don't lose in regulation, because then Minnesota's probably playing for a field goal. It's just frustrating. But I hear you about the Justyn Martin. My thought is I'm kind of sticking with it, and I know you will all disagree with me. I think you start Garbers for the Rutgers game. You do. You play him through the Rutgers game, but you have the hook. All right. You go in with the mindset, you go in with the opportunity, you go in with the playbook that if it's that vastly different, you might have to switch it mid-game and give Martin a look. All right. So I think my ideal scenario in this game, you start the kid, you start the captain on your team against Rutgers. And if it's 2 picks in the first half, then you bring in Martin, right? You don't start Martin, you have him ready and say, hey guys, this job's back open. But Garbers is going to get the start. But if you struggle, it's not because of some fluky, weird interception nonsense, which I think Garbers has lost that benefit of the doubt now with more picks than interceptions, almost more than 2-1 at this point, interceptions to touchdowns. Then you flip-flop it, you get the installs into the bye, and then it's Martin's job for the rest of the year. I don't think we should flip-flop this quickly after a performance, now that Garbers is a bit healthier, with another chance for UCLA to see how they look as a team. Because then you got 2 weeks again to be like, hey, let's reset this again. Because again, this is the college football season where they get 2 built-in buys to the regular season. So I say you go with Garbers this game and maybe ride it as long as you can with Garbers. And then you finally flip it heading into the Nebraska game, heading into the Iowa game, all right? Where some of those teams are going to have much better D linemen than UCLA has O linemen, at least from a physicality standpoint. And then you use Martin and simplify things, knowing that maybe offense is going to be slim against some of those opponents anyway, and you flip it. In this game against Minnesota, UCLA showed some flashes of being able to go vertical, hitting some throws, and I saw the return of J. Michael Sturdivant with a 15-yard per catch radius. But again, I think the glaring numbers I've seen floating around social media, your leading rusher is also your leading receiver in TJ Harden. And it is just as equally frustrating to see how limited those numbers in both the receiving game and the rushing game for UCLA. Frustrating. In this game for the Bruins, they took their first lead. I am happy about that, but in no ways is that a passing grade. They are at a D on offense, right? It is just unbearable to watch at times. The first half, I liked it, and then they threw a pick. All right, that's where you get your knock and Garbers. The first half was probably a B minus to C plus. The second half, utter garbage. You put it all together, you barely get a D out of it. Now we're going to talk some defense next on Locked On UCLA. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you should check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. It's not just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else. Here's a fun little stat for you. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. And on LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Well, in a year that I thought this wouldn't be possible, shouldn't be possible, was not going to be the case, the UCLA defense is the better of the two units when you look at their offense and their defense. Sit side by side, who has kept teams in the game, who has made more plays. And yes, I know the defense couldn't get off the field to win the game or at least keep this game going into overtime instead of Minnesota winning it in regulation. But again, this is where the penalties and the stupidity and lack of discipline defensively and all around, but some of the stupid plays they made on defense really hurt the Bruins in this game. So for that, they get a D plus floating on a C minus. They deserve better. They deserve a passing grade, but is the lack of discipline, right? One of those 3 pillars Deshaun Foster really wants to talk about: discipline, respect, enthusiasm. You see some of those guys with enthusiasm on the sideline, but discipline and respect, I think, go hand in hand with the game, right? When you don't respect the game, you probably aren't very disciplined when playing it. So when you're failing at 2 of the 3 main pillars of your coach's main mantra in his first season, then what does that mean? Under a new defensive coordinator who is literally bawling his eyes out in terms of his passion and want for these kids to succeed. And we finally saw some pressure. We saw an individual performance with so many tackles for loss by an individual Bruin within a game. We haven't seen that since 2016. Right? 4.5 tackles for loss for Schlesinger. He's got 2 sacks, the leading tackler in the Big Ten. Yes, partially because other teams have so many offensive possessions, so he's got to make so many tackles. But I think, is having a breakout performance like we saw a bit from Kane Medrano in 2023. UCLA, while struggling to have pressure, blitzes. And in this game against Minnesota, blitzed, in some key moments. But when it comes down to picking up 3rd and long, Minnesota just wasn't talented enough to do it over and over again, where we see the better teams, like the top 25 teams UCLA played all in a row. When it was 3rd and 15, every single time, all those teams picked it up. In the Minnesota game, they dropped it, an overthrow, a wide throw, and you could just see the lack of talent or the difference there. Now, the physicality, the passion, the enthusiasm from PJ Fleck and the Golden Gophers, that was there, especially their fans in the Rose Bowl. But you could also say the same for the passion and enthusiasm shown by Kaika Malloy and a team that is just very short on talent, theoretically held Max Brosmer, their transfer quarterback, to what is considered, if you go by QBR standards, maybe you discredit it, but a QBR number that was lower than Ethan Garbers' numbers on Saturday. And that's a kid who threw 3 picks. Now, for UCLA to have won this game, I thought they needed to force a couple of turnovers. They did not. But they did keep the Golden Gophers off the board in the first half. They have not been able to do that at all this season. They have been trailing at the half. They've been giving up touchdowns or points in the opening quarter or on the opening possession in nearly every game. And UCLA finally had a lead. But in the first half, UCLA, I thought, helped with a missed Minnesota field goal, played an A-, an A- on defense, all right? But then you're looking like, all right, Schlesinger, solo effort. You're seeing Kalen Moore make some plays, even Kane Medrano. I'm liking the development of Femi off the edge, Femi Oladejo. But there's no consistency. There's no consistent pressure. The Bruins are there, about to make the play, and they just let the quarterback escape, right? You see a kid make a hit, slip out of his fingertips, so close to making a play, or then they're holding in the secondary, right? They're making they're just missing the plays. Sometimes they're in position, and they just don't make the play, all right? In this game, UCLA 3 sacks, 7 tackles for loss. Ironically, only 1 pass defended. So that meant when they generated some pressure, maintained coverage in the back half, deeper third of the field, that meant Brosmer had nowhere to go with the football, and they only really broke up 1 pass when they weren't interfering with the play. Okay? 8 second-half penalties is not going to get the job done for a UCLA team that has aspirations of not having a winless Big Ten season in their inaugural year. I don't want that embarrassment tabbed to Deshaun Foster. I don't want that embarrassment with this here. That was a game UCLA clearly should have held Minnesota, all right? And whether we're going to go back and forth and debate the 4th and 1 on your own 10-yard line, yes, if you're playing NCAA football, if you're playing Madden, yes, you go for it because that's a video game and you do it. And you're like, you need inches. Well, when has UCLA proven they can get a foot for a win? Like Minnesota did against USC, and PJ Fleck described when you have a chance to go beat USC by getting an inch to win the game. They did it, barely, by the nose of a football that took 20 billion replays to do so. And then you look at a UCLA team, it's like, do you want to put your defense backed up late in the 4th quarter? Or do you just expect Minnesota to score and give yourself more chance and more time instead of going for it, right? That big key 4th down decision where I see some try to discredit the decision from Deshaun Foster to maybe punt. But the game of football is not meant to go for it 4th and 1 on your own 11-yard line to put your defense backed up like that. Maybe that would be some Bill Belichickian type Patriots way nonsense, right? When they're in their heyday. All right, we don't believe this, but we're going to let them try and score, kick a field goal, and we're going to decide if this game goes to overtime or not. Well, UCLA is not good enough to have a decision like that be put into the hands of the offense, nor are their special teams as bad on the punting unit that they should take the ball off the hands and out of the feet of Brody Richter, who has done a pretty nice job special teams-wise. But Gotti made his kick. But the Bruins, man, it's just frustrating. Defensively, again, I'm saying they should be passing, but the second half things that they figured out, Minnesota came out in the blink of an eye in 2 possessions and took the lead, right? With wide open guys. So close to an A performance in the first half, but then you see the second half performance, the game on the line, they couldn't get a stop. Minnesota ran the ball to eat the clock up second and goal from the 9, and then you sit on it for a delayed game penalty, and you give it up to them on 3rd and goal from the 3 when they could have just kicked a field goal for the tie in overtime. That's where I'm losing it from C- to D+. There are promising moments. The defense is the better of the 2 units. Then the offensive coordinator, that's the big name, with talented skill positions, some returning offensive linemen, a senior quarterback who's been there forever. And UCLA can't figure out an offense. And defense, despite losing to your top defensive players in the secondary, losing the big name defensive coordinator after his first year, losing the super uber talented pass rusher and pass rushers around him and Latu and company, and even a linebacker room coach as well. And that is where the defense has come to surprise, and I've liked how they've come up and played this year. All right? I've liked it. Yes, they've had poor moments. They've had ugly moments. But with the lack of talent, the lack of pass rush, the passion that their defensive coordinator shows, and yes, maybe we can question his decision-making on what plays and how to design a defense, but let's be real, they're not talented. They were not supposed to be led by their defense, and they are this year. And here they are, 1-5, 0-4 in the Big Ten, heading into a one-score underdog game against Rutgers, where I'm surprised that Rutgers is at least a 9-point favorite at this point. But here they are. It's frustrating, right? Frustrating. Answers need to happen. Or we're just going to see this team go 1-11, and that could be ugly. And I just hope it's not, but it will be. Okay, frustrating. Absolutely frustrating for this game against Minnesota. Now we go talk about the UCLA men's basketball team because the preseason poll came out, and I still think they're sleeping on the Bruins from the Associated Press. Next on Locked On UCLA. Game time. Go check it out, right? It's the postseason in Major League Baseball. It's the midst of college football. So you're still going to go and watch the Bruins. And hey, there's lots of other events as well. Comedy, theater, musicals, concerts, all sorts of that with Game Time, right? All you got to do is check out Game Time. I've got all-in prices so you know what you're going to pay right up front. No surprise fees at checkout. You got to toggle that feature on, but all-in pricing so you know exactly what you're paying right up front. And there's a lowest price guarantee on Game Time, or they will credit you 110% of the difference. Check it out with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry, the Game Time ticket coverage. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, Locked On College, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, wrapping things up here in the Locked On UCLA podcast. We are talking, once again, the preseason polls, because the days, the time, it cannot come fast enough until basketball season is upon us with Mick Cronin and company. The preseason poll has UCLA listed as a a top 22 team in the country. So the Bruins getting some top 25 respect. That's what Joe Lunardi's been floating back and forth with the 5 or 6 seed in bracketology. Maybe you're looking at Ken Palm. You've seen other posts. You've seen other things, other polls. UCLA, about the third best team expected to be in this Big Ten, just ahead of Illinois and other takers. Michigan State also expected to be just behind them, but the Bruins ahead of Kentucky, Ole Miss, and another Big Ten team in Rutgers, who's supposed to be very competitive with their talented youth. So, where are the Bruins and why are they listed so low? It's tough to rate a team with so many newcomers, which is why we struggled to figure out how good or bad the Bruins were last year with a lot of freshmen. It did not pan out well, and Mick Cronin went under 500. And the way he's been spinning it is he's been really proud of his team finishing 5th in a Pac-12 conference that was, in his mind, talented through a couple of teams in the dance, a few teams in the dance, actually, with Oregon winning the Pac-12 tournament, Washington State coming out of nowhere, and Arizona. And with a lot of youth, they spun it into where they did better than expected after seeing everything, right? And a little bit of an injury bug, too. This year, this is go for broke. This is UCLA going after the NIL, getting the players they want, getting the players they need, and I am expecting third weekend of the NCAA tournament good. NCAA Final Four, and, talk to some UCLA friends. Yeah, it's like, all right, you got to wait, see how the bracket plays. No, play who's in front of you and kick some butt. I'm expecting this team to go deep, make a run, plays defense so well, it doesn't matter who you're playing, and bracket-wise good, all right? And remember, this is their schedule right now. You've got Gonzaga, who's on the schedule, preseason number 6. You've got North Carolina, who's on the schedule, preseason number 9. Arizona on this schedule, that's preseason number 10. That is a 3 top 10 games between teams in a 2-week span in the middle of December. And how many of those games are at Pauley Pavilion? None. How many of those games are in the state of California? 1. Let's not forget, you've got Indiana and Purdue 14th and 17th And those games are on the road. So maybe what we're doing is projecting this UCLA team forward, and you're thinking of their 5 possible toughest games, right? And if you include Rutgers, that game's on the road too. So if you include like their 6, UCLA's got currently 6 games in this preseason top 25, which will fluctuate. It'll change, but I think all these teams, those Blue Bloods, are going to be in there in December, and I think Rutgers will be floating around there later this year. UCLA, all those games, none of them are at home in Westwood, and most of them are on the road. And yet I still think they're talented enough, deep enough. John Rothstein went on a whole rant in the middle of Sunday, October 13th, I believe, where UCLA's got one of the deepest teams in the country. Now, figuring out who's got that bread and butter, who's going to get the ball late in games and closing minutes, that is going to be a question for Cronin. Who is going to be the right man and not going to get his feelings hurt when the matchups decide something else, that what might be their best 5 for one game might not be the best 5 for the next, or a little banged up. Who can handle this, or who can handle a mismatch better with UCLA maybe hurting a little bit in the 5, needing something consistent in the 4, but they've got the scoring, the talent, the rebounding, in which case they didn't have that in years past. They didn't have that last year. But what they do have this year is just about every weakness covered with what Mick Cronin did in the portal and tried to address with what he brought back and snagged out of the freshman recruiting in the class of 24. A team that is currently 24th or 22nd in the preseason poll, just behind Florida, behind, ironically, Mick Cronin's old Cincinnati Bearcats, who are in the Big 12, behind Texas, Marquette. You got the Arkansas boost because they got Coach Cal up there. I'm thinking UCLA's up there, and they're riding high for what I think to be national championship contenders, like the short list. And right now they're hovering around 24th, 23rd, 22nd. And that's where they've all been placed. But this is a team that, yes, they will take losses. They will. The schedule's tough. As I just said, they are a team with all those tough games, none of them in their home gym, and most of them out of their home state. Quite a few of them, actually, across the country, which is just how Big Ten play is going to be. But a team, nonetheless, that is so talented from where you're starting 5, as I believe, Andrews, Clark, Johnson, Bilodeau, and William Kyle. That's changed from what I did months ago, but that's been my current starting 5, where you rotate between Mack, you rotate between Perry. You got Eric Daly Jr., the Swiss Army knife. Don't forget your 7'3" dude off the bench. Oh, your team captain, he's losing minutes, but he's okay with it. He can still shoot and defend. Did I forget Eric Ferrini, another freshman? Oh, Dominic Harris, who can shoot threes. Dave Singleton 2.0. And my point is made. You can throw names left and right, but this team is incredibly, incredibly deep. And I think they're going to make a run. And I think the low ranking in the preseason top 25, I think it'll be a little different post 24-25 season. Those are my thoughts. All right. Let me know if you like, comment, describe. If you agree with me in any of it, you hate it all. Anyways, get your hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.